Welcome everyone to the last presentation of Thursday, the fourth day of LibreFest 25. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today will be what I oftentimes lump into as advanced editing capabilities. And it's basically saying, well, you learned in the past or you already had experience of being able to write into a word processor, and that's about 80 to 90% of what you need whenever you write anywhere. Now, yeah, you have a few details in terms of adding an image and putting in different formats and making it accessible, but that's relatively straightforward and simple. Simple in the sense that you can learn it relatively easily once you actually play with it. The What we want to talk about is how to take your book to the next level. And this is similar to what Josh mentioned yesterday in terms of building the textbook of the future. Now, I don't know what the textbook of the future looks like. I do believe the textbook of the future is a textbook of technology. I believe it's a textbook of interactivity. It's a textbook of something else, who knows? But those factors are going to be important in terms of building this infrastructure. So many, if not most of us, have a different picture of what textbooks were or can be based off of our experience there. So let's start out with that aspect, right? So most of us that have been around the block one or a couple dozen times are familiar with the idea of a textbook as a physical product that you go to the bookstore in order to purchase, and you then have, hold, call your own, name George, write it up, mark it up, highlight, and do everything you can for it because you own it. It's 100% your rights. Um, but that's changing, and the first step in that evolution has been shifting to providing textbooks online or technology enabled. And one can envision that something like just generating a PDF of what you have that you distribute. And that is still one of the most popular ways of distributing online textbooks out there. However, because modern textbooks are technology enabled and the modality of accessing them is through the internet more and more these days, it means that we have access to all the technology that the internet provides. And that is a long list in order to be able to go through. I'll be talking about some of the basic principles here, and then we can start to evolve off it. But why do we want these things to be interactive or dynamic, so the ability in order to introduce more advanced capabilities then helps to deepen conceptual understanding of what you're looking at. And there are many things that you can envision where that is critical in order to be able to move forward. For example, a conversation that we had yesterday was for understanding sculpture in art. It's great to have a three-dimensional impression of David uh, or the Sistine Chapel or something. And I know I'm using Western examples here because I don't have other examples off the top of my head. But the ability in order to get some sort of three-dimensional spatial understanding of it is really quite critical in being able to understand that just two-dimensional pictures don't do justice. Um, um, you add different types of technology, you can enable your book in order to be provide real-time feedback. So in other words, this is not just a static unidirectional aspect. You can actually have students engage with the material and get responses off of that and use that in order to help guide their understanding. And that can include adaptive learning paths. That's essentially the learning trees I talked about on Monday. Um, and there are ways in order to integrate learning trees and other fragmented, or let me phrase it, adaptive pathways into textbooks that goes beyond what we actually do. Um, you can introduce interactivity in terms of facilitating annotation. And we have two capabilities on there. One is notabene and one is hypothesis, neither of which we've actually discussed so far, but I'm happy in order to go through it in the next hour or during the breakout rooms if you guys are interested. In fact, we're hoping we're at the first step of getting an NSF grant in order to build an annotation system that's native into our platform, that's more oriented toward academic purposes than what hypothesis instead of based off the notabene infrastructure that came out of MIT 15, 20 years ago. Um, uh, while this is not necessarily a technology-oriented aspect of making that is interactive, it is a key aspect of having technology-enabled textbooks and being able to update them was essentially the question that you guys prompted me right before our conversation. So you can update things as necessary in order to reflect modern times. I don't think there's any political science faculty in this audience, but if I were teaching political science right now, I would have to be updating the book every single week, given what's going on in the country. Uh, and lastly, all these ideas basically transitions the idea of the learner as a passive reader, the more traditional way, into a more active participant. And the more likely the students are active, the more engaged they are with the material, the more likely they're going to internalize that material and then correspondingly learn from that material. And the correlation is strong in that aspect. So if you can actually embrace technology and move things forward, you can have a much more impressive, much more impactful resource that you're providing your students than being stuck in the past. That being said, the past is necessary in order to build the infrastructure off here. Far too many projects just focus on the pretty icing on the cake. And if you don't have the core content below the text and the images in order to facilitate that, it's not going to go anywhere, or at least it's not going to have nearly as much of an impact as I think it should. Um, and that's me on my soapbox. So, again, why do we build interactive OER? Like I mentioned before, it offers a range of educational benefits to facilitate learning outcomes. I just want to summarize some of them just in case you don't believe me. Of course, I'm not sure if any of you would challenge me right here, and I would mute you if you did. So, nonetheless, it facilitates active learning. Can provide immediate impact. You can personalize learning paths like learning trees. It provides multimodal learning for students that facilitate or learn in other ways than just conventional text. You can actually use this in order to obtain data and provide analytics to students. It can be used in order to facilitate collaboration or social learning. Annotation is one example of how that actually works out there. It helps to increase motivation in part because you increase engagement. I'm far more interested in engaging in an engaging resource than I am in a non-engaging resource. And this philosophy is actually very similar to the import of sorry, the importance of customizing your resource. So if you can get your resource customized for your audience is more likely to read it. And there are a variety of ways in order to do that. The key point is essentially to make sure that your textbook or your resource is calling to the identity of the student, the reader. And there are multiple identities that we as individuals can claim that you can actually call for. One is cultural, if that's useful for your specific field. In some cases, that's not terribly useful. Trying to introduce cultural responsiveness into mathematics is possible, but not nearly as rewarding as if it were in the social sciences. You can have gender identity, you can have sex identity, and they are two different things, irrespective about what the federal government says. You can introduce location. For example, I'm far more interested in reading a book that talks, if I were a student, that talks about Davis, living in Davis and things around Davis and Sacramento area than I am about talking about things that happen in upstate New York. Example that I give there is oftentimes when we discuss pollution, one of the traditional things we talk about is the Love Canal in upstate New York, which is what birthed the Superfund site, which was a heavily polluted environment that was now that was in the early 80s. So not only doesn't call out to students in our current times, second one is the California students don't care so much about upstate New York students and vice versa. Now, I shouldn't say care, it doesn't call to them like that. But if I were able to point out to students that there's a Superfund site in Davis, uh, and actually start to make a connection off of there, then every time they drive by, they'll see the Superfund site and they'll understand and make the connection that's out there. They're more interested in that process. And that's essentially what technology is able to put down there. Another example was what was discussed just a few hours ago of Concordia, where they were talking about their mission statement. They actually had an entry in every chapter dealing with how the topics of the chapter addresses their religious upbringing. Now, I wouldn't do that in my course. In fact, I'd probably have serious issues if I were to go about doing that. But it was important for the audience, and it was also important for the administration in order to be able to pursue OER. And it's an example of what customization capabilities you get that from OER. So, anyways, let me move back onto this. So ultimately, you have a question. I really don't think it's much of a question of to interactive or not to interactive. And I want to just talk about what you can do. So if you see an interactive on another page in the LibreText, you can have it on yours. That's the whole point of the sharing is caring model, or you can have it and you can customize it in some way in order to be able to advance that. That may take a little bit of work, but it's probably not going to take a lot of work because it's already integrated into our platform. If you see an interactive on another website that you like, that you feel should be integrated into your platform, it most likely can be integrated into our platform. It will probably take more work, and depending upon its licensing status and a handful of other things, it may take a lot of work. But in principle, it can be done. Uh, and it may require coding in order to be able to get the same capabilities out there. Lastly, if you envision a new interactive, something that you actually think if you had this doing this, students will be engaged and get all the benefits of that, then we most likely can create it. And I use the word we as in the royal we, meaning the community can actually move forward in order to advance that. So if you have an idea about what you want to have created in order to be able to move your book from a two-dimensional passive perspective to an interactive, oftentimes three-dimensional infrastructure, please let us know. We're happy in order to have a discussion around that. So, what type of interactives can you have? And this is actually the last slide that I have on this presentation, and then we're going to be transitioning into hands-on. So I encourage you to start to pull up a page that you're going to be able to edit so you can actually follow along with what I'm doing. So anyways, what type of things can you actually do? You could have the more traditional, I'm use the word traditional very loosely here, interactive feature in textbooks, and that's like videos. You can add videos, it's more engaging. It is passive unless you consider being able to stop the video and start the video to be active, and I don't typically do that. But it's at least it moves the flat two-dimensional infrastructure a little bit forward. You can introduce sounds or audio files, and that could be useful for a variety of purposes. We've had people have a recording or an audio version of their page. And then provide that at the top of the page for people to be able to listen if they're on the go and that's out there. We will be introducing sometime in the near future the ability in order to take pages from our books, push them through Amazon's Poly system, which is essentially a text to audio output. It's enabled, it predates AI, but AI has come in order to improve it. It does a great job of making an audio book for your things. So we can go about doing that for your entire book, and you can just grab it and run with it if that, again, is a modality you want to be able to introduce. You can introduce interactive questions, not just text-based questions like you'd have for a conventional book, but embed those adapt questions directly so students can actually interact with them. They can be embedded both formatively and summatively in order to be able to make, again, a more interactive environment. You can embed animations. You can embed simulations. Uh, Widgets that you actually interact with in order to be able to get some results out. You can embed three-dimensional models. I gave an example on Monday on virtual dissection as a mechanism for doing that. One of the other demos that I provided, and I'm happy to pull that back up, is the Rosetta Stone. So instead of talking about the Rosetta Stone and saying a picture, you can actually move it around, interact with it, look at it, and say, here are hieroglyphics, here's ancient Greek, and here's Demotic in the middle, and start to actually look at it and have a much greater experience that's connected to that. You can embed interactive calculations, for example, the Jupyter infrastructure that was discussed on Tuesday, where it also had this binder technology in order to embed that. Carl actually gave a nice example of how he did that for his signals class. But that's just one technology that you can come in with calculations. There are lots of other technologies that facilitate these sort of things. And lastly, and this is a catch-all, which is basically interactive math. interactive drafts, interactive charts, interactive chemistry, interactive geology, interactive lots of things. Every different field typically has some form of interactivity that can be used and integrated onto it. Depending upon that field, there may be some unique aspects for it. For example, in chemistry or organic chemistry, we have a set of interactive components that are very important for learning organic chemistry, but are not so important for learning um, political science. So that's one of the reasons why I just had this catch all this right there. So there was a comment that Francis asked in the chat. Did you say you could be translated as an audiobook? That's exactly what I said. Yeah. We just have to flip some switches in order to be able to make that. So you'll have the ability when you create a book in order to translate it through the machine translation infrastructure into another language. And that same infrastructure can be piped into making an audiobook. And then you can select what speaker you want in order to be able to express that. So if you really want your book to be mentioned to you in the Queen's English, you could find a speaker that will speak it in the Queen's English and such. It's actually pretty cool. And the advancements in AI the last couple of years have really brought that up to the level of being near perfect. Okay, that is an upshot. What my intent to do is to focus on videos to begin with, because that's the first and most important thing that people want to. I could show a little bit of sounds, and I can go into any of these things, depending upon what your guys' interests are. I don't want to guide you because there's lots of ranges off of here, and I don't know the full makeup of everybody in the room. So I'm going to close that and open up this thing. So this will be handed out. We need to revamp it into the current Academy Online, but it's basically a summary of the skills that are oftentimes important in order to master for editing, including many of these things, making hyperlinks, image figures, which we went over. Now we're going to go into videos, adding tables, etc., like that. So you'll get this soon, so you actually have a checklist of all the skills that you want to be able to master in order to be able to do what you want to do. But right now, I just want to pull up an empty page and add a video. So I'm just going to make a new page here. I have this button here. You don't have this button. You have to use the remixer to make a new page for a variety of reasons, but I'm just going to do this. So this right here is LibreFest 2025. Like I said, I encourage you to follow along because it works a bit better than just watching. So here is my page. Nice, pristine, empty page. And I want to add a video to that page, the first thing that we want to talk about. So I'm going to go into the edit option. And it pops up and it has this nice friendly editor that we've actually looked at several times today. It has this code here. I'm just going to delete this so it doesn't get in the way here. And the goal is to add a video to our platform. Now, just like everything else that we're doing here, it's best to have a good idea about what video you want to add before you do so, not to actually think about what you want to add at the time that you are trying to add it, just because it's two different things that are out there. So our infrastructure does facilitate searching in order to be able to do this thing, but it's not the best environment for evaluating. Under elements, there's the video option right there. So if you click on the video, it pops up this modal here. If you have a URL of the video, if it's a publicly exported video, you can actually paste that in there. However, it will also do a search through through Google. So if I did something like cats and dogs, it's going to do a search directly through Google's Yahoo and find these things. So let's say I want to grab the first one, the ultimate cat and dog video. Sounds like a great thing to have in a chemistry book. If I click on that, actually, I don't want to click on that. If I want to insert the video, I can click on this in order to look at it. And here it is, the perfect video for my book. Yeah, I can save it. I didn't do anything other than embedding it, and it's right there. Now, it's probably a bit bigger than what you want your video to be. So I'm going to go back to edit this, and I'm just going to grab this and make this to the size that I want. We typically do that, and there you go. That being said, I mentioned earlier on today that we have bots. One of the bots is the Brad bot. That Brad bot actually fixes videos to be a very specific width. I think it's 56%, which is just about the right size and not being too big or not being too small. And when you print it up in your book, it doesn't take the whole page for a video that is essentially useless for students to be able to access. I could save it. And now I have the video and It's center justified automatically. I can run with it, and then you're happy to go. Now, there may be issues for accessibility in terms of bringing in YouTube videos, because subject to the WCAG requirements I mentioned on Tuesday for the upcoming Department of Justice rules, you need to make sure you have a caption available. Uh, Now, YouTube does pipe in all their videos through automatic captioning, but many of those captions are mediocre at best. Um, and if you don't own the video, and I don't own this video, I have no rights to actually modify the transcript for the video, which is one of the limitations of using these things. That being said, and I mentioned it when I was discussing ancillaries, the conductor is an environment that you can actually upload your own cat videos. Prefer not to use cat videos, but upload your own academic videos and then embed them into your book here, and then you have full control over that. In fact, you have an editor, not an editor, a viewer called Able Viewer that we use that is more oriented toward accessibility than the YouTube video. Um, so just as a reminder, the video that's embedded into this page here is not stored on the LibreText platform anywhere. So that means that the original person who made this video could take it down, and it then compromises my book if they take it down. Now, if that were an image instead of a video, there's a term for it called hot linking in order to be able to address that. And there are some ethical aspects about hot linking and why you can hot link and things like that. Justin mentioned it earlier on today. If you grab an image and hot link it from Wikipedia by just copying the page and pasting it in here, then Wikipedia oftentimes kills the hot link so that it dies on you within 2 weeks, I think, is roughly the period that's on there. And that makes it so that they can preserve their integrity without providing support for a variety of other platforms that are out there. So just be aware of what the consequences are when you bring in YouTube or any other repository that's outside of the platform that's connected here. Both from an accessibility perspective and from an integrity perspective. And if you go to many old interactive OER textbooks, you'll find their videos dead. Uh, so you have to play a game in terms of how much effort you want to spend updating and curating your book in order to make sure that it stays up to float, because invariably the video will die on you at some point. Unless you're doing one of the earlier YouTube chocolate rain-like meme videos, if you know what I'm talking about, from 25 years ago. Anyways, um, 20 years ago. So that's adding a video. Uh, I can come in here and I'm just going to delete it and keep it like that. So that's what most people do. So if you are teaching a Spanish, or sorry, a second language, it's useful in order to have audio components in your in your presentation. For example, here's a French book, and it's very interactive in that they have an audio book, an audio section right here. You can't hear this, or you may not be able to hear it because the audio is not wired to here, but I was able to hear that. Um, and this is exceedingly important for second language books. But you can see that this instructor also added a video using this Powtoon infrastructure. That's the same infrastructure that Christina and her team and Alejandro is still here somewhere, who can actually provide more information about this infrastructure. I'm not so, I don't know a lot about it, in order to make these interactive videos that you then upload to YouTube. Here is introducing another interactive, but this is H5P. I talked about H5P today and a little bit earlier. You have access to it in Studio, and they built an interactive here. It basically made it a 15 problem homework system, but it's summative and you're able to work with it. This was done in a right way so that's actually accessible. Um, and I didn't go over how you can make them accessible, other than saying that we have these workflows that shows people how to go about making them. And this individual has two videos, two of these things. So this is a very interactive book. And I would argue it's important for this specific subject matter to be interactive. Um, uh, so anyways, I'm going to digress and get back to how to add an interactive video. So there are different ways in going about doing it. This right here is the video file. It's on my screen. It's an MP3 file. If I do this, I just drag and drop on here, it adds it as a attachment. So it's actually at the bottom of the page where we have attachments. It's not on this specific type of page, but it's the bottom of the page. And I can click on this link and it will pull it down and download it. Now, that's not necessarily interactive. That's basically a hyperlink to being able to pull it down there. But it's better than not having anything at all. Let's talk about making this thing interactive. And we're going to be going through the templates, which is what Justin mentioned before. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go under Elements, and I'm going to go to Templates. So as Justin mentioned, templates are pre-made scripts that we've already put together for you that you can then grab and use effectively. Um, and the one that I want to do is, I believe, add audio player. And it pastes this little code here. Now, I mentioned this also, I think, offline or off the video, and it's important in order to emphasize at times. The infrastructure that we have right now, these pages, is not just HTML. It's actually HTML augmented with a special power called DekiScript. So it's a mixture of a programming language and markup language. Now, if you're uncomfortable with those terms, don't worry about it. The key point is it emphasizes that this page can be a lot more than just text. You can actually run things on the page in order to do certain stuff that you want to do. And this one right here, if I click on this thing, is a DekiScript that's embedded in here. And it's basically telling me that I can add this audio player and I just need to edit some things. Now, this is not a graphical user interface. It's not a little modal for you to put things in, but it's relatively straightforward for you to be able to add these things off of here. Hold on one second. I want to do something on this page in order to make it so you can see the attachment. So sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Here we go. Okay, so here are the attachments. So you can see that this file has been added here. You can attach anything you want to a page, although I recommend most of the time it just be in images there, and any of these other ones to actually store them on the repository capabilities of Conductor. It just makes it easier to find it and do searches, being able to update them as necessary across the board. But this updates an attachment in the same way that an image is up there. So if I want to, I'm going to edit this page. I'm going to expand this thing. All I want to do is it asks for what's the file type. And I have three different file types here that's part of this technology. MP3, OGG, and OGA. If you don't know what those are, it's not overly important. 90% of what you're going to be doing is MP3. If you are, I think OGA is more Mackie, and OGG is an open source thing. There's some history behind it that I'm not comfortable with. And then it just has a source. And that right there is just a copy of the link here. So if I were to right click and copy the link address, I could then paste it into here like that. And there we go. And this right here is the caption. If I have a caption for this thing, there's no caption I have available, so I'm going to delete that. I'm also going to delete this last paragraph, and I'm going to save. And this is going to present that video, that audio in this file. Now, this looks a little bit different than this one right here. This right here is the native viewer for Chrome. Uh, I think if you did it on this is the native viewer for any browser that you're looking at it. I think Safari will have it look a slightly different than Chrome. Pretty sure that's true. However, this right here looks different than those, and this is because this is Able Player. Able Player is a video and audio player that was designed to be as accessible as possible. It came from the University of Washington. They got a grant in order to build this, I think, in 2019 or so, maybe 2017, and they've been building it for a handful of years since. And it has all the features that you can use in order to make your audio and video, if you want to upload a video, to be useful. It's the same technology that is in the Discuss It technology that Christina Moon and Alejandro and others presented on Monday, because it can upload a transcript, it can upload a VTT file, which is captions. It can even upload what's called an alternative sorry, an audio description, which is necessary for Class AA of WCAG for the Department of Justice Awards. I promised you I wasn't going to go into those details because that's beyond what we're talking about. The key point is this technology is uber developed in order to handle accessibility requirements, and that's exceedingly important these days. So here it is, and I could play it, which you probably can't hear because my output is not it's not piped into the Zoom flow off there. But I heard some French there. Since I don't speak French, I have no idea what it was saying. But I presume it's something like here. So that's how you add audio. Now, when you want to add a video that's part of that you've uploaded the conductor, it's the same thing, except your audio file, you're going to add a, where are we here? Wait a moment. And there's a video, actually, that's not the one that I want. I'll have it's on a different entry that I need to pop down there. So I'm going to ignore that right now. Let's just say this same viewer can be used both for video and audio. Okay, so let me take a look at what that slide deck is because I was again planning on going through these things, but I wanted to get your guys' feedback on which ones to do first. So let me see if there's another quick one. Otherwise, I will ask you guys what you would like to do. Do you guys want to see how to embed and adapt a question into the book, or do you have a different preference that you'd like to see?
Yes,
Yes,
adapt
please.
is fine.
Yes.
Okay.
May not be formative, maybe summative, I guess. So
Okay. I'll show both. So let me pull up my adapt course because I need to have access to question IDs because everything is done with question IDs, both within adapt and in taking questions and moving it out of there. So as I mentioned before, you can embed questions into your page, both summatively and formatively. And as a reminder, Joanna was talking about, if you embed it formatively, you are basically saying you can look at the problem, you can interact with the problem, you can get the answers auto-graded in the sense that it goes through and submits it off there, but it doesn't track your performance with your name in a grade book somewhere. Um, uh, so, Senia, I hear you. Let me address that a little bit later on if you'll give me the time, please. Okay. That's fine and dandy. Summative is the opposite, requiring students to sign in order to be able to see the question. They submit the question like it were done on Adapt, but they're essentially doing it within their book. And you can do that. So you can put Adapt into your book, and you can put your book into your learning management system. So you can have these things styled up so they still interact with the same resource, but the textbook is the homework system. And such. So let's.
but we're not using adapt right now, so I just want to see how we use formative in the textbook.
Okay. Well, let's start with when you say formative, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, what's called
Formative. That's fine.
formative.
Yeah. So formative questions, the way they're set up right now, is that they actually sidetrack adapt and they go directly to the core technologies. Yeah. So right now it's not set up, but it's planned on being set up by the end of summer so that any question that's in adapt can be put into a book. Right now it's any H5P. I meant formatively specifically. Summative, it's all adapt. But formative, only H5P, WebWork, and iMath AS. So those technologies are shortcutting these things. So if you use native technologies that are not put into adapt formatively yet, but they will be very soon. Actually,
Oh,
Wisdom.
okay.
No. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I that I'm there are two ways in which we can do things. I'm getting tangled myself. You can use adapt any adapt question could be added formatively. It's just that the current setup is it embeds the entire assignment, not an individual question. Now, that's the thing that we're going to be tweaking in order to be able to do it. So let's just do the first version that we avoid adapt completely. And just go to the original core technologies. So the one that I want to grab is going to be Studio, an H5P. Okay, I should just do this. So here's Studio. So again, Studio hosts the H5P interactives. You can see them here that Arabic and radiometric dating has been updated the last hour or so. So it makes sense because it's a big infrastructure that people can tap into, that you can too. And it's not unheard of that people pay a lot of money in order to have a H5P connected to your learning management system. Um, but there's no reason for doing that because you have access to it right now in our platform. So each question that's out here has an ID number. This is separate from the adapt ID number. It's the ID number for H5P. That ID number is right here,
Mm.
H5P ID number. And that's all you need for embedding an H5P problem into a book. So
Mhm.
let's yeah, let me minimize that. I'm going to go to edit. We'll paste down here, and there are two options right here. Actually, let me go through all four of these things. So I mentioned accessibility earlier on today. So that's the accessibility checker. If I run it on this, it's not going to show anything because there's nothing there. This right here is Jupyter, and that's embedding via binder a Jupyter code that then gets run here. This right here are the two ones that deal with interactive questions. This one right here grabs from adapt directly, and you need to give it an adapt code to embed. This right here embeds outside of adapt to the core technologies. So you can embed from H5P, iMath AS, and WebWork because those are separate subservices of adapt. So you can completely avoid adapt, and adapt is
Mhm.
used in order to centralize things. So you're essentially using them formatively. I know I'm repeating myself multiple times here, so you probably want to see it in action. So let's do that. I'm going to click on H5P. It pops up this query. This is a little box that we have. I can expand this as DecuScript like I did before up here. And it just wants an ID number. And all I need is the ID number here. We can make this graphical, which we can at some point. And I've just embedded, in this case
Mhm.
here, Arabic as into the textbook. I put it into a box here. I call it a query box. That's just the term that we used for outside of adapt. And that's that. It's interactive. I can work off of this thing. You guys can work off of this. I can give you the URL for this right now, which I'll paste into the chat since it's public. You can pull it up right now and you can start interacting with these things and get them out. Now, I don't speak Arabic, so I have no idea if I'm getting this thing right or wrong. And I can almost guarantee I'm getting it wrong. Uh, but I can check it, and I actually got something right. So, woohoo! And such. So that's how you make interactives. Of course, there are issues dealing with accessibility of this technology. It needs to be done right. This is a good question of asking, if you were blind, how would you be able to interact with this interactive?
Right.
Um, and I can't. So this is not a great interactive. There are potential ways in order to be able to do these things. I'm still pursuing them, but I'm very concerned about the specific type of interactive technology and accessibility because it's quite pervasive in the open community and it has a lot of problems. Um, so anyways, that's one way in order to do that. You can parse through the studio. You can do a search in order to look through it. So if you want to look at just say chemistry questions, here are a whole bunch of chemistry oriented questions. I don't know if Belford is in the audience. He was this morning, I think. So here's something that he's created for balancing reactions that you paste into this. This is actually can be made accessible. I need to confirm that another way because each block you can type in the number that you want in order to be able to do that. And that's an accessible way in order to do so. Joy asks, is it possible to embed a formative learning tree? Yes. So any question in Adapt you can embed anywhere else. In fact, you've already seen that with the reflection questions. That right there was embedded discuss it questions, but just not embedded into our textbook, but embedded into, in this case here, Academy Online. You can embed it anywhere you want. Anything that is HTML enabled and has access to it can go about doing it. It may be rendered in a different way to deal with what's called responsive, that the width is variable. So instead of having it side by side, it put it into a row because it's a very narrow scope off of here. But this didn't require you to sign in at all. That's why all the responses here have no names on here. If this were used summatively, there would be actually names written down here so everyone would know what everyone else is saying off of that. So, um, okay. That is summative. That's formative. If you want to do that for the other technologies, you need to know the specific code for iMath AS. This should be AS or web work. The code for web work is actually a path. It's not a code, and that's
But
because the structure that's in place for that. Yes.
but try to see iMath code. I don't know. Is that the ID number of the question? I really
Yes.
didn't find it
It's the
in.
ID number. So you have to go to the iMath AS question. You have to go to the iMath AS server and find that database question.
Oh, in the server, not like my open math.
No, no, we don't grab from MyOpenMath. So it's an R
Oh,
version of the system. So you
that's
probably, if you give it any number, it will pull up that question, assuming it's public and able to be pulled upable. Sometimes
I
you can
see.
make
I
your
see.
questions
That's what I'm
private.
doing wrong, I guess.
But if you
Right.
grabbed one of the more recent, iMath AS or MyOpenMath is a much bigger server than our iMath AS server, even though it's the same technology. So if you give it a number that doesn't exist, it doesn't know what to do.
I
Yeah.
see.
And I could bring that up there, but since you're the only one I think in this audience that has an iMath AS code or access to that, um, it's not important right now. And web work is a little bit more complicated, involving
Okay.
the path
Okay.
behind it, and I'm going to avoid that because it's not so important. What we're going to be doing is making it so you don't need to grab these individual components. You just need to get the adapt question, and you say, "I want it to be formative," and it will then figure it out and spit it out there. So it's going to be a little bit more efficient than it is now in the near future. But that's by using adapt as the intermediary. Anyways, these things, if I were to save problem one here, I don't know what problem one is on. Uh, this is problem one in our iMath AS server and such. And this again is
Oh,
whatever.
right, right.
Yeah, it's not very good. So two different technologies, both designed in order to make things engaging. So then comes the question, well, what about adapt questions or questions that you want to be used summatively, irrespective of what they happen to be? So I'm going to do the same thing, but now I'm clicking on that. And now I just basically ask for an adapt number. Uh, so in that case there, I can go to adapt. Uh, and I think I made something, well, whatever. Here's something I pulled up, which is precipitation and dissolution. Question. Uh, this is, I think, a web work or I'm is an OpenStax question that we expanded greatly the solution, so it's actually instructive. All I need to know is get this code here. I can copy this. I paste it here. I press OK. Now, if this thing is designed to be um, right now, it's designed to be summative. So that question is not set for formative use, which means that by adding it in here, I need to sign in, or in this case here, I need to actually access the course. So I'm already signed in, but it doesn't know that I'm enrolled in that course because I'm signed in as an instructor. I'm not signing in as a student. So what it looks like if you're not signed in, which we can do because this is a public course, I'm just going to pull it up in incognito mode. Uh, so it says here's formative, and this one says you need to sign in order to be able to see that question. So again, if you want to use your textbook as a homework system, you need to have someone sign in order to be able to do that because we don't force students in order to access the page, to sign in to access the page, unless you want it to. And that's part of analytics, which is a different topic. Are we guys cool with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there were a few comments here, one by Francis and one by Joy. Francis said, based on accessibility laws, what do you mean that the interactive text shouldn't be used? That is my interpretation of that. Yes, Francis. Uh, Uh, well, let me rephrase that. You can make a subset of H5P questions accessible by our standards. Uh, uh, those are perfectly fine if you make them accessible. Uh, those same question types are the ones that are in our native technology and adapt. Uh, so the question is there any benefit of making a multiple choice question in H5P versus a multiple choice question in our native technology? It's approximately the same effort, just it's almost the same sort of interface off of here. The benefits, if you do it right, let me phrase that. If you use it in adapt, then the adapt is intrinsically accessible because we put in all the wires and everything to make it accessible. If you do it in H5P, you have to do certain workflows in order to be able to make it work. Uh, so my recommendation is uh, it's best to do it in adapt and forget H5P unless you're interested in more interactives, things that you actually can move around and drag. That's where H5P is really good at. So any homework platform or mediocre platform can do multiple choice questioning. That's the first thing that you're able to do. So if you want to add that into it, you don't need H5P. But if you want to have drag and drop, we don't have that baked into our platform natively, but we don't need to because it's already exists outside. Or if you want to be able to interact in some other graphical way. Now that's not accessible, but in Adapt, we have an alternative technology. You may remember that if the student requires accessibility alternatives, they can then switch over to a series of multiple choice questions to take the place. So that's valid. So my opinion in saying that you shouldn't use H5P is narrowed to the scope of you shouldn't use it if you make it inaccessible or you don't have an alternative technology in order to back it up in order to be compliant with WCAG. And that's a good general argument across the board for every technology. So either you make it accessible or you have an alternative capable of doing so. We did that within Adapt. It can work here when it's embedded into it. When the student signs in, it recognizes that they need an alternative in order to be able to do that. But if you go directly from the server, from the H5P server and avoid adapt, it doesn't have that alternative capability. I gave a link a little bit earlier on when I was talking about accessibility, the Department of Justice thing. I included a link to this Open Education Global Connect discussion where I actually posed a series of answers uh, to the problem of H5P accessibility. And one of them was not use them, which freaked out a lot of people. The other one was make alternatives, like I mentioned before, or fix them. The problem is that while we can fix them, when we fix them, then they're bifurcated from the general community, so not everyone benefits from it because the way it's a shared infrastructure off of it. I like to believe that they will be improved in the near future, but I can't promise that. I know that was a long discussion regarding that, but that everything I said right here applies to basically every interactive. So that's why I'm reinforcing that aspect. And I encourage you to take a look at that department of or that discussion that I made on H5P because it does have some interesting things bouncing back and forth in aspect. I was hoping it was going to be a little bit more insightful of a discussion, but it did give a lot of people's perspectives on things. Okay, so Joy asked a question a little bit higher up. Okay, Joy, is it possible to embed informative learning tree? Yes, in principle it is, but it turned out that when we tried to do it earlier this week, it wasn't wired up properly in order to do that because the unique aspect of it. But it's on my developer's aspect in order to be able to make it work like that. The caveat off of that is that every question in your learning tree would have to be set formatively. Uh, and so that might cause some issues in terms of making a formative tree, unless you explicitly say, I'm going to be making a formative tree and I'm making all these questions that are set up like that. So, yeah. And again, that's a limitation associated with the fact that it's a community of questions, and you don't want to step on other people's use of those questions or their intellectual property and such. So, um, Francis, okay, and Francis also. Okay, so nonetheless, these are embedded questions. I think this is great. It is one way in order to really get students engaged because students, at least when they're doing homework of anything that they will do in the classroom. If you ask them to read a book, they may read a book. They may not read it as much as you want, but you ask them to do homework because you have a carrot in terms of scores for their performances, they'll spend time off of that. So if you can actually juxtapose those questions next to the text that you want them to read, uh, then just by proximity, they're going to get exposed to the content that's out there. Plus, it also helps them in terms of guiding them to read the stuff that's necessary for their questions. Okay, so uh, those were those things. Does anyone else want me to go into showing how Binder works, how any of the other things work? I know we just have a few minutes left, but those three things of video, audio, and equations covers about 90% or 95% of interactives in books. Well, let me mention something quickly since no one's chiming in here, and let me talk about learning objects. I see these things you don't because I'm signed in as my thing. So learning objects were meant to be a repository of objects that you can use in terms of building your resource or to complement your resource that doesn't conveniently fit into a textbook. For example, in chemistry, I can go in and see uh, experiments. I can see dry experiments that don't require wet chemicals. I can go in the wet lab and see these things, and I can start to parse through. We're working on efforts in building the repository up of as many labs as possible, so you can come in and say, "I like this lab, I like this lab," and I can move that forward and such. We're still trying to hone this thing down into an effective manner because you want a schema and you want to be able to identify requirements and things like that. But we have hundreds of labs in here, which is quite convenient for people in order to take a look at and use as they see fit. The dry labs were particularly important during COVID when we had little to no access to wet labs, and hence this was the way that we went about doing it. But we used it for ab initio calculations for upper divisional classes and such like that. But from the perspective of analytics, we have oftentimes this interactive analytics. And these are various widgets and things that we have found, identified, hopefully internalized within our platform that you can grab and say, I like this, I want to embed it into my book. For example, interactive molecule. So we have a molecule generator that you can actually use in order to make interactives on here. But I'm just going to show the interactive this right there. So here's caffeine. This is the standard thing, and I could take this thing and I can embed it into my book. Now, I can do it by looking at the code, but I can do it by transcluding. And I believe Josh mentioned about forking and transcluding during his remixing. The same thing happens here. Transclusion is also just called reuse. So here is a page, and I want to reuse this page in my book. I can do that. It's like embedding, but I'm embedding another page within my infrastructure into that one. And so all I need to know is what page it is. So I'm copying the URL. I'm ignoring this thing right here. Where's my book? Oh, I think I'm sorry, I moved away from it. So I'm going to just copy this and I'm going to edit this page. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go under elements in this content reuse. That's the same thing as embedding a page. I can click on that and it wants me to parse through and find the page. I just basically paste the page I want to do and I insert. And it has this little code here. So again, right now it's not quite markup language and I save it. But that means that when I render it, it's going to render in the molecule right there. Now, I can't have a catalog of every possible molecule that you may want because it would be unbelievably big. So it's important in order to be able to build your own molecule, which you can do via this molecular generator, and it will generate the code that you want in order to be able to spit out, which I'm not going to go through here because not everyone is so excited about embedding or creating new molecules to embed into your system right here. But this is an example of a field-specific technology that's out there. But you can look at other ones here in order to be able to figure out what you may want to embed that's off of there. And some of them are really quite interesting, like including the Concord's Consortium simulations and other things like Desmos, unit conversions, and things like that. Yeah. Like I said, if you could see it, you can embed it. And these are things that we have collected for you to be able to embed, but you can do lots and more than what's outside here. Sadia has her hand up.
Hello, Delmar. I was wondering if you have something where we can have like condensed structures or molecules to make the questions for adapt for basic organic chemistry.
Yes. Um, so let me just answer ZZ Price's question. You could fork that if you want, and then it just becomes embedded into your page, and you'll see the code base. This provides a mechanism that's unforked, but it still has the same transclusion capabilities. If we were to update this in one way or the other, then everyone benefits from that. Although I don't envision that there's much that we can update for the caffeine molecule now shown. So in regards to making two-dimensional structures, that is our new organic chemistry infrastructure. And I don't have I have yet to embed. So if I understand it right, you want to embed the ability to create a molecule two-dimensionally. Actually, can you clarify
That's
a little
right.
bit?
One of the manuals that I'm making right now is an organic chemistry manual, and
Mhm.
I don't have the paid version, so I'm having trouble drawing them in like Chem Sketch and importing them to LibreText. They are all coming as, they don't come, so I have to save them each time as pictures. And when I do it, like condense it, it's not like all straight. It just kind of goes a little off. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Let me postpone that conversation. I know what you want. Part of the issue is that the the people that we're working with in terms of that capability, um, and you should have seen it within Adapt. Uh, Here, I'll just show you what we have. Uh, and this right here is the organic chemistry thing. Let me I didn't make the hydrogens on here, so I should do that. But anyways, we can do this. We didn't actually work on trying to build a set of tools for making these things, in part because ChemSketch is pretty good. I know it's commercial and actually quite pricey, but uh, uh, but you can always take a picture of things. The other one that what we will have is if you have the Smiles code or the Inchi code, you can actually insert that and it will draw up the molecule from that automatically. That's what we're planning on having set up sometime in the next few months. And also be able to show the three-dimensional version of that molecule subject to just mechanical predictions, um, which are getting good these days. So you don't need a full crystal structure of every single molecule you may want to show. That may not be exactly what I know that's not exactly what you want. Uh, uh, I think we need to have another discussion offline in order to be able to go into more
Yeah, because
detail.
I have no idea what smiles and inches structure codes are
Oh, okay.
either.
So think of that you draw a molecule, you can actually express it as a chemical code that if you were to put it back into the system, it will redraw it.
Okay.
So you can actually, if you take something and you create you get the smiles for that code or the Inchi code, which a Chem Sketch will do or Chem Draw. Uh, you can then paste it, and then our platform will read it in and create it. Um, so all you need is just that code. You don't actually have to recreate what it looks like, as long as how it generates it is in a way that you want it to look. Like if you have conformers, it doesn't have conformers in there. Or if you want to have it in a certain orientation, like you don't want it to be like this, but you want it to be kind of linear. Uh, you know, actually, if you want it to be something like reflect like this instead of what it was before, it may require a bit more finesse or not smiles. Anyways,
Yeah,
this
I
is
was
more
trying to
nuanced.
have these kind of structures in chem sketch, but the bonds are like not coming out like all same distance, like, same length. They are like a little off. If I ask it to beautify it, it will like change it some other way.
Yeah, it does lots of things. If you email me, we can have a discussion regarding this because we're still at I wouldn't say the initial stages. We're about a quarter of the way into everything I want to be able to do for organic chemistry. It's just OChem has lots of complexities behind how it operates, as you no doubt recognize, beyond how I teach my general chemistry class or how I teach my quantum class, with the exception of perhaps Lewis dot structures, which are very similar in formulation. So I could put a couple dots on here. Hopefully Sol doesn't get upset with me uh, uh, doing something like this. So, okay. We're now 5 minutes over. I'm happy to go through any of the other things that I had on that list, wherever that list happens to be. Um, there are lots of things in math that people want. GeoGebra, Desmos, CalcPlot 3D is something that we have integrated into a platform. If you go to the math library and you look at that interactives, that's where the math components are off of there. We have interactive spreadsheets that we've been working on honing that will be integrated into the platform. So if you want to have calculations that look like there was another here. I thought I had adapt on here. Here we go. And again, I'm kind of bouncing around, but here is the spreadsheet capability. So you can actually make it and have people type in the spreadsheet. It has very similar functionality, and you can even couple it into plots and download data. And that could be a particular use for accounting, for statistics purposes. I consider these things to be short form projects. If you want long form projects and you need a full blown spreadsheet, then you want to use the Forge in order to be able to do that, which is well suited for doing those purposes. I mentioned it before, I think, when I was showing the capabilities, the interactive capabilities that we have up here, where you can come in and rip apart the molecule um, and then internalize off of here. So there are many things where three-dimensional capabilities are particularly important for that. I showed a virtual dissection here, but if I want to do the same thing with a molecular orbital, that's important in order to be able to strip it up. Or my instrumental analysis class, trying to get students to understand three-dimensional capabilities of an instrument and how it works. Now you can actually have them have three-dimensional capabilities, and lots of things come about, are really simpler in order to be able to do that, and other things. Um, in terms of simulations, depending upon which simulation that you want to do, you can integrate it in different ways. For example, you can embed a PhET simulation if you want. Like this one right here is just build an atom. And this right here can be in your book. And you can have them build an atom. In some cases, that's useful, depending upon how you want it to work. I'm not remembering how to build atoms because I guess it's technically I'm a subject matter expert. But anyways, you can go about doing those. This is pre-made, but this is actually hosted from the PhET website. So over in Colorado that actually put this thing together and that we can grab it. We can run it on our own platform, but we just haven't set up a server to run PhET simulations. Typically, I find PhET simulations to be too clunky, too much stuff in various spots. And it doesn't get to very simple things that I want them to be able to do, but it does get the point across in terms of being able to learn from these things and such. And that's just chemistry set PhET or PhET in general, which includes chemistry, math, and lots of other topics. But there are other simulations all across the board that can be integrated. Like I said, if you can envision it or you can see it, we can actually embed it into your book. It's up to you to decide if it's a good idea to embed that specific thing into your book. So with that, I am going to, don't think I have anything else. I mentioned GeoGebra. This is an example of GeoGebra, which is really quite popular in the math environment. So this has to do with uh, rates, limited rates. I can't remember the connected rates there in terms of the rate of one thing compared to another thing. But this right here is a native technology that's in iMath AS. So they have their own graphing capability that are then interactive and you're able to use constructively. Because it's an iMath AS, it folds into adapt. And this is a question that students can have and use off of there. So I said it a couple dozen times. I'll end with it again. If you can envision it or you can see it, you can actually embed it into your book. And please keep in mind that there's no reason to be stuck in a passive two-dimensional perspective on things. However, I recommend strongly that the two-dimensional structure, the traditional text and image perspective of the textbook, be the bedrock and be solid before you start going into the icing that goes onto it. Because if you put icing onto stuff that's not terribly strong, it has much weaker effect. And in some cases, I believe it's actually detrimental to the student because they don't see the context of what they're doing and why they're going about being assigned to one of these problems. Okay, so let me stop here.